And so I drive up and I end up showing up at this graveyard, and I'm like, okay, this is a very strange place for a first business meeting. And I finally find this gentleman who was my coach that I had hired at the end of this tomb. He asked me this question that I really didn't have an answer for at the time, which is, can you tell me what your life's purpose is in one sentence and make me believe it? And so I kind of tried to pull some random answer out because I didn't have an answer at the time. And he was like, I don't believe you at all. You clearly don't know what you want to do with your life. You know, you've built these things and you've had some success and you got some time and some freedom, but you don't know why you're doing those things. And so it's great what you've accomplished, but what I'm going to do before I teach you anything is help you find your purpose. And so what was originally kind of a frustrating moment for me, because I just didn't know, I had that kind of confliction, turned into a multi-month process of him helping me try to discover what that purpose would be. So we founded ISA in 2016 with the mission of solving our world's energy. And so over the last decade, you know, many thousands of experiments, lots and lots of trial and error, working with different physicists and scientists, we've been successful in building something that does exactly as I described. So we've built effectively a solid state system that uses electromagnetic fields to harness energy at the quantum level and interact with the quantum field that exists around us and use that to generate electrical power. And so we crossed this threshold finally where we had something that works. We had it independently validated by numerous engineers and PhDs. We patented the technology internationally, and we knew how it works, why it works, how to change it, how to modify it, and we effectively crossed this threshold where now we have some core fundamental technology. And that was a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of crazy challenges along that way, you know, blowing up so many circuits I can hardly count.
Welcome to the Holo Movement, Awaken Your Purpose Podcast, where we interview incredible people that are living and breathing their purpose. And you can too. If you would like to support this programming, drop us a like or leave us a review. Now let's dive in. Hi everybody, my name is Zenka Caro. I'm founder of LightNet, and my passion and purpose is to make the impossible possible. And I know I always say this, but we're here with Hunter Bjork, who has truly made the impossible possible. He is CEO and founder of ISA, which is, check this out, I'm just so excited to actually say these words. They have invented a quantum energy device that is affordable, scalable, and distributed. It is sustainable. So this device you can put in your house in the middle of nowhere and have no solar, no wind, no nothing, and your house, it's not making a sound, it's not contaminating anything, and your house is just running on as much energy as it ever needs in a single day, in a single moment. And this can also power communities like Sedona, can power off-grid communities that are popping up all over the world, and can even be put in rack mounts and other things that really need free energy that is affordable and incredible based on Marco Rodin's math, among other science. This is the Rodin coil, you guys. This is the coil that comes out of our hearts, the earth, and we're going to dive into a little bit more of how this technology works. And Hunter has been working on this for 10 years, courageously, diligently, patiently, studiously, expertly. They have scientists from all over the world lending their hearts, their minds, their intelligence, and these guys are really making the right moves. They're heading into manufacturing very soon, and it's an honor to have you in the studio, Hunter, because you guys just released the videos, right, that were kind of in the background, kind of secret, and now they're in the public, and you've been getting all the hero calls finally, right, after 10 years of hard work.
Well, first, thank you so much for having me, Zenka. It's a pleasure to be here and talk with everybody. But yes, we did finally come out of stealth mode after almost a decade of being kind of behind the scenes, working on this kind of thing, you know, going from what we thought might be an impossibility at first to now knowing it's possible. And it's the first time we've take it a step back to kind of share and educate the public on what we're building here at ESA. So very exciting time indeed.
Wow. So are you like the hero that you grew up to be? Like, did you have a childhood hero and you became that? Because like, you're the person, I mean, I know other people are working on free energy around the world, but you guys have made the one that's small enough, cheap enough, ready enough. Like, it's literally giving solar a run for the money because it's cheaper, right? Like, it's not only better, it's cheaper. And I think like, you guys are the forerunner, right?
So, I mean, I didn't ever think that I would end up doing this. So I didn't necessarily have like a hero per se that led me to kind of come to this place. You know, it started off, I was running other businesses at the time, and I always was very passionate about building things. So I was always obsessed with technology, building things, and creating models around that to create something like a brand or a company. And so along the way, I started out with just building other things that had nothing to do with energy and chasing what I think a lot of the mainstream world would consider to be success, and, financially, and having time and freedom, and not necessarily knowing what I was going to exactly do with my life. But along the way, I met someone who was a coach and became a mentor of mine. And the first time that I ended up meeting him, I was running a technology company at the time. I was doing quite well, and I had hired him to be my coach to help scale this company. And the first meeting I took with him, he gave me the address of where I was going to show up to meet him. And so I drive up, and I end up showing up at this graveyard. And I'm like, okay, this is a very strange place for a first business meeting. What are we doing here at this graveyard? Very weird. I figured, I'm going to sit down, we're going to learn about P&Ls and marketing and raising capital and all these kind of conventional business ideas. So eventually I drive around the graveyard, and I finally find the location that he gives me. And it ends up being what's called a mausoleum, which is basically short for a tomb. And it ended up being the tomb of Tiny Tim. So if you've ever heard the ukulele song, Tiptoe Through the Tulips, that's Tiny Tim. So we go into this tomb that goes underground. So we go underground. It's all beautiful white marble, one of the most beautiful places I had been at the time. And I finally find this gentleman who was my coach that I had hired at the end of this tomb. And I'm like, what are we doing here? This is the strangest place for a first business meeting. And so he sits me down, and he asked me this question that I really didn't have an answer for at the time, which is, can you tell me what your life's purpose is in one sentence and make me believe it? And so I kind of tried to pull some random answer out because I didn't have an answer at the time. And he was like, I don't believe you at all. You clearly don't know what you want to do with your life. You've built these things, and you've had some success, and you got some time and some freedom, but you don't know why you're doing those things. And so it's great what you've accomplished, but what I'm going to do before I teach you anything is help you find your purpose. And so what was originally kind of a frustrating moment for me, because I just didn't know, I had that kind of confliction, turned into a multi-month process of him helping me try to discover what that purpose would be. Eventually that led to the founding of ESA. And really my purpose in life is just to help secure humanity's best probable future. And so we started looking at, once I figured that out, what problems in the world would prevent us from having a good future. So we had a list of existential threats to humanity's future, and energy was on that list. Energy is the largest contributor to pollution on the planet. We keep basically cooking the earth, and if we continue to do that, we may not have a future at all. So that seemed like a good problem to solve for, but I didn't have any clue about energy when we started this, other than having a background in technology. But it's all was purpose that got us there. And he gave me some frameworks, which we can talk about, of how we found that purpose and the exercise I went through. But that's kind of how we started. And we were looking at, what is the problem of energy? What do we need to do to solve it, really?
Yeah, and why don't we go into that first, and then I do want you to tell us, because a lot of the listeners that are listening right now, and a lot of people that are involved with the Whole Movement Purpose Lab, agree that having that organizing sentence like that guy, that you believe it first of all, and then they believe it, because it's a direct transfer. We were talking about this the other day with dogs. Like, they know if you're lying. So if you think I'm lying, it's fine to fake it until you make it for sure. But we're going off on a tangent. But still, like, knowing what really lights you up is one of the most beautiful things that you can do for everyone else in the world and for yourself, because it's been the magic carpet ride of your life and you're just starting. Like, I was on the phone with you the other day in person as well, and you're just like, I feel like I'm just at the beginning, even though we're 10 years in. Now we're in the beginning because the company's ready to go. We're in a whole new phase. So it's like, it's so exciting where you've come to from that focus of this. I want to pull a huge lever on the planet. I want to pull one of the biggest levers that scientists all over. This is the dream of scientists all over the world, from Japan to everywhere. And it's like you said, it's been a journey. So I want to ask you what you did around the problem solving, and then I want to go back to what that exercise was that you found your purpose.
Yeah, so we founded ESA in 2016 with the mission of solving our world's energy problem, as I mentioned. And so in the beginning, we had kind of the luxury of not having experience in the industry. So we got to start with the blank sheet of paper of what really is the problem. And so we started looking historically, currently, what are the challenges in energy? And there was a few things that stuck out to us very early on. The first was that, well, if you look at history, we've had things like renewable energy for over 100 years now. Before we even built the first electrical grids in New York City, we had already invented solar. So it kind of begs the question, as so many people in the world today agree, we should build a sustainable future that makes logical sense. It kind of begs the question, why didn't we already do it? What has been the holdup for 100 years now? And even we're still talking about how solar and wind is going to be the next transition. And so for us, it became very apparent, well, there's got to be some holdup here. There's got to be some bottleneck that's prevented this from happening. And so if you kind of boil away the conversation around the ethics and the moral concerns about building a sustainable future, at the end of the day, really what it boils down to, unfortunately, is just the simple fact that renewables are more expensive and less profitable than fossil fuels. And so if you ask any major energy company or even an individual consumer that has the intent to transition to clean energy, why they didn't, more often than not, the answer is going to be, well, we had to spend more money to get there, or we were going to make less money in the process. And so you have this conflict between logic and reason with the emotional intent and the morality of wanting to transition to something sustainable. And so for us, it became a question of, okay, well, what if we could just invert that equation? What if it would be possible to make clean energy much more profitable and much less expensive than any fossil fuel alternative? And if you could do that, you could get everyone on the same page, irrespective of their intentions, to actually end up doing the right thing. So people could sit back and say, hey, this makes financial sense, it makes logical sense. And the oil companies that are so fixated on profit would say, hey, we can make more money doing the right thing. We should probably go ahead and do that. And so we needed to tie together the emotional reasoning as well as the practical reasoning. And so easier said than done. And we realized quite quickly that unfortunately there wasn't any sources that would be able to enable that, at least on the market at the time. And so what we started doing is we started traveling around the country looking for sources of energy that would be new things that were pre-commercial. And we were looking for sources that possessed a handful of key attributes, the things that would be necessary for us to get to that inversion of that equation. And these would be things that would be, first and foremost, always on. So sources of energy that are non-intermittent, they produce power 24/7. Additionally, you'd want those to be decentralized, so you have the power at the source of consumption rather than transmitting across vast distances. Sometimes when you move power through, say, a power line, you lose 30 to 40% of the power. So you would have to get rid of that inefficiency as well. Additionally, you want it to be scalable. So you'd want it to be a very flexible solution and being able to have really small power output as well as really large power output. But when I say scalable too, what I'm also talking about is using readily available parts and materials, things that aren't hard to get in a supply chain. So not using like magnets, for example, that 90% or more is made in China, things that we can get here that are easy to get, that are cost effective, so we can actually mass produce it so that people can benefit from it, we can have a big impact. And then if you could check all those boxes and still have it be a clean energy source as a built-in benefit, you'd have the ideal source of energy. So that's what we were looking for. We're going around, taking that thesis, seeing is there anything out there that would check all those boxes. So we got to meet so many really cool inventors and see new technologies, everything from nuclear fusion to hydrogen technology to nuclear batteries to SMRs, all these kinds of crazy inventions. And as we were going through all of this kind of discovery process, we kept running into people that were proposing this idea that empty space around us isn't actually empty at all. It's actually full of electromagnetic energy. And it turns out most of the universe is made up of that field. About 68% of the universe is made up of this kind of missing energy. And NASA would call it a dark energy. We say the quantum field. But that the majority of the energy there is basically invisible to us. It's outside of our perception. It's very hard to measure. We know that it mathematically exists. And so the question for us then became, okay, well, it seems most logical that we would use the most abundant form of energy in our universe to power the future. And maybe rather than drilling all these holes in the ground into all of these oil fields and pumping oil out of the ground, maybe there'd be a way to drill a hole in space and pump oil out of the quantum field, not oil, pump energy out of the quantum field and use it to generate electrical power and power the future. So as I mentioned in the beginning, we didn't know if that was going to be possible. We had heard lots of physics concepts and theory around it. So it became a question of, okay, well, that seems to check all the boxes. That seems to be the most logical approach. Now we got to figure out, can you actually do it? Can we find anyone that has built anything to show evidence that this would be possible from a physics standpoint that we could build on to actually build something that works? And so over the last decade, many thousands of experiments, lots and lots of trial and error, working with different physicists and scientists, we've been successful in building something that does exactly as I described. So we've built effectively a solid state system that uses electromagnetic fields to harness energy at the quantum level and interact with the quantum field that exists around us and use that to generate electrical power. And so we crossed this threshold finally where we had something that works. We had it independently validated by numerous engineers and PhDs. We patented the technology internationally. And we knew how it works, why it works, how to change it, how to modify it. And we effectively crossed this threshold where now we have some core fundamental technology. And there was a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of crazy challenges along that way, blowing up so many circuits I can hardly count. But eventually getting to this kind of inflection point. And then it became a question for us of what can we build now from a product standpoint that's going to be most meaningful for the world? What's going to solve the biggest pain point in the market? And so what we're building today from that core technology is effectively a generator in its simplest description. But it's a little different than you would think of your everyday kind of gas generator that you'd put on the side of your house, for example, in the sense that it doesn't use a fuel source. The fuel is effectively the quantum field around us. It doesn't make any noise, it doesn't produce any emissions, doesn't have any moving parts, and actually about 80% of the parts are off the shelf, and it's a compact power generation system that's designed for really 3 product applications, which you touched on earlier in the conversation. So the first is residential homes. So if you're a homeowner, you could put one of these in your garage or nearest your electrical main line and be off the grid and energy independent for about a $30,000 price tag. And so in one way, well, you can look at us, yes, we're building a clean energy company and technology. The way we look at it is we sell freedom in the form of energy independence in a box. So it's a liberation, and I think that's a much more compelling proposition for the world is, yes, there's a more affordable, clean energy source, but people can start to become more sovereign and free in that way. So the same system you would use for your residential home, obviously sustainable communities, municipalities. There's great use cases for multifamily, multiple dwellings in these kind of communities to build on. And then the third is that we've really tried to make it be something that's going to be modular, a multi-use, multi-application. And so we made it be a rack mountable solution as well, because everyone knows today AI is continuing to use a ton of electricity, and that is putting a lot of pressure on local communities. It's putting pressure on the everyday person because they're sucking up so much energy. They're causing blackouts and all of this other turmoil. So to get rid of that problem, well, you could slide one of these in a data center rack and stack them if you need more power in that rack, and just duplicate that across the whole data center. And you could take the data center off the grid the same way you took your home off the grid. And so you can create these large pieces of infrastructure that are sustainable the same way we did these small individual consumer level installs as well. And so that's what we're building today. We've been working on that for a couple of years. We're getting really close to bringing it to market. And as we were talking about with the video, it's been the first time we started to actually talk about what we're up to and what we're building, because we've crossed this inflection point. We got something that works, and now we're just trying to put it in the right package so that everyone can benefit from it. So that's us in a big nutshell, but it's been a labor of love, and we've been enjoying the process. And as you had stated, it does feel like we're just getting started even a decade later, because now it's like, okay, we got the thing that we envisioned building, and we finally figured it out, and now it's about giving it to the world and getting it out to the public. So that's a very different phase, and it's refreshing, and it's a lot of fun, to be frank. So
yeah, and it's so cool because it sounds like from when I've talked to you, you can divert your marketing budget to like an education budget, or to your engineers, or to your whatever, your family, or whatever you're doing, because this thing just sells itself. Like you're already getting the orders, and so you don't even have to sell it. You don't even need a sales team. You just need a phone number. It's kind of like, well, I'm sure there's some companies like that in the world, but anyway, this is just an incredible moment, a threshold, like a walking forward for humanity, like to know that, I mean, I don't even understand what you said. You're saying that there's 68% is the quantum field, it's dark energy we don't understand, and then you're able to just tie into it. So say one more thing about that, but then let's get into that incredible conversation that launched your determination to get through 10 years of courage, patience, determination, and...
Absolutely. So the reason we know the quantum field exists is that for many decades we've been studying the cosmos. Most notable kind of organization that's been doing that is NASA. So NASA has all these telescopes pointed out at space, and they've been observing things. They're looking at planets and stars and black holes and all these crazy things out in space. And there's a few things that were noticed a long time ago that were very interesting and confusing to the physics community. And the first thing that they noticed is that it's kind of strange. Planets are actually seeming to get further away from us. Galaxies are getting further away, stars are getting further away, and that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It kind of seems like the universe seems to be expanding. So they started to study this more and more, and they brought a bunch of scientists and physicists in. And the second thing they realized is not only was the universe actually expanding, but it was expanding faster and faster. So it was accelerating as it was expanding. And so the problem with that, that they sat back to have to deal with, is that, well, that's impossible by all the mainstream known physics that we understand today, is that the universe is getting bigger faster. How can that be possible? And so what they conclude is that the only way that would work fundamentally in our understanding of science is if there was some force or field that was greater than the whole of the universe, acting upon it, pushing it outwardly. And so they coined these two terms, which we don't really use in our work, but they are kind of the mainstream terms, is that they just called that a dark energy, and they called some of it also dark matter, because they didn't know what the heck it was. They had no clue. They were like, it's dark to us, so we can't observe it. We know it's there mathematically, and it has to be there to support the observations that we're making in our universe. And so they just coined it those two terms. And so they were able to mathematically back in and say, well, 68% of the universe is made up of this missing energy, which they say is dark energy. And about 27% is made up of what we call the dark matter. And only about 5% of the universe is what we see and observe around us, or otherwise known as 3D space. So 95% of the universe is actually outside of our perception, outside of our measurement. And the universe is actually a lot bigger.
We're like walking around like this.
Yes. So it's much, much more vast than that tiny 5% that we know of. And so when you ask about where is the quantum field, what is the quantum field, that's what we're really talking about. It's that 95%, the missing space in our universe, the vastness of space. And so where that actually exists too is, well, we know we live in a multidimensional universe as well. There's about 12 dimensions or so that have been proposed in physics. And well, that missing space that we're talking about, that 95%, is just the other dimensions that are around our three-dimensional space. So higher dimensional flux fields. And so when we're talking about harnessing energy at the quantum level, where we're getting it from is that higher dimensional flux space, which exists purely as energy all around us at any point in the universe. And it's this vast sea of energy that is right here, right in front of us. We just can't observe it.
Yeah, so you're leveraging the boundary conditions of the expansion, or you're of the dimensions?
Somewhat of the dimensions. So the way I usually describe them to people is like the way you can think of other dimensions are like buckets. They're other containers of space. So rather than thinking about them as like, oh, okay, we're in some parallel universe having a different conversation about the topic, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that there are other forms of space, or buckets or containers, that have additional or less degrees of freedom than one another. So we live in a three-dimensional space-time. 3D space has certain attributes that govern it. 4D space and so on has different attributes that govern it. Now it turns out in just say 4D space, for example, there's a tremendous amount of energy. It exists purely as energy. And so that's really where we're talking about getting the energy from. Is okay, can we figure out how to interact with these other buckets of space and be able to kind of just move some energy from one bucket to the other, and be able to then convert that into usable power. And so that's a very deep rabbit hole in terms of physics, how we go about that. But the way to think about, okay, well, where is the energy? Well, it's in these other buckets of space.
Because my 12-year-old said, like, they're going to notice that you're stealing from them. But you take the toroidal field and you put it into each other, like compress it into, bind it, compress it into each other, fold it into each other, right?
Yeah, so the mechanism that we use is a toroidal field. So we use an electromagnetic system that guides all of the flux of the field down to a singular point. What that would be called in physics is generally called a monopole. Some people would call that a singularity. Now, it's not a real singularity like we would observe in space, like a gravitational singularity, otherwise known as a black hole. But the way you can think of it is effectively it's kind of like a desktop black hole. Now, it's not going to suck anyone into another dimension. It's like an imitation of a black hole using a magnetic field. And so that we use that as a tool. That's one of the many, many conditions we need to do these kinds of reactions. But that puts a lot of stress and strain on the magnetic field. And magnetism is a fascinating medium. In some ways you could think of it as it is effectively our medium of exchange. We're trying to interact with other containers of space like 4D space, and that is outside our dimension. But there are various forces that do interact with other forms of space. So these are things like gravity, light, sound, magnetism, various kinds of plasmas. So you can think of those are like our levers to pull on, where if we can basically cause a reaction in the magnetic field in 3D space, we can cause effects in 4D space and vice versa. So we use it as our medium of exchange, kind of almost a pipe between the two buckets, if you will. And so what we're doing is we're causing what's called a piezomagnetic reaction to stimulate this process. So what that really means is that, well, if we take a magnetic field and we apply stress to it via this singularity, this monopole, and you can do it other ways too, but the maximum amount of stress we can apply is through a monopole, that the field will respond to that stress, and it wants to just fight back against that stress. So it undergoes this process of what is called self-organization. And the field begins to respond to that stress. It has this little handy trick where it has the ability to siphon off some additional energy from other dimensions of space. It pulls it into itself, holds it temporarily, and it uses it to fight back against the stress. And the way that happens as we observe it is that the magnetic field increases in flux, so it gets stronger. So all then we have to do is just shave off kind of the delta, that shift in density in the field, as additive electrical power in the circuit. And so again, we cause this stress on the field goes stronger, we take off the increase in strength, and that's your additive in the circuit. So magnetism is doing a lot of the heavy lifting for us. It's doing most of the work. And there's plenty of other examples of other materials that do very wonky things like that. Good example would be, for example, piezoelectricity, very widely understood in mainstream physics and science, where multiple kinds of materials,
right?
Well, we'll say quartz, for example. If you take a quartz crystal and you apply a lot of pressure and stress to it, it will generate a small amount of electrical voltage and current. That's called piezoelectricity. It's used in pressure sensors all around the world. So you have an effect that we're stimulating via this pressure and stress we're applying. That's very mainstream. Now what we're talking about with magnetic fields is a little different. We're talking about that happening in a field, not a physical material. Mm-hmm. But there's plenty of examples, like I say, piezoelectricity, very widely understood. All we're talking about that's different is we're doing piezomagnetic reactions to use that as kind of a lever to get that energy out of the field and into something that we can actually utilize. So it's a very deep process. There's a lot more going on than just that, but that's kind of the fundamental mechanism that starts the process and allows us to get that energy out of the field.
Okay, I can take that to my 12-year-old and explain that now. That makes perfect. Well, it lightens up that path. That's so fascinating that we are now into the Russian doll of dimensional explorations. This is hilarious. It's too much for one brain to imagine. I can barely handle this dimension, but let's just. So I love that this mentor scalability, executive coach came to you and what was that exercise that he asked you to do in that moment?
Yeah, so, as I said, he asked me what my purpose in life is and can I articulate that in one sentence. So I didn't have an answer. I threw him some answer I just pulled out of the ether and definitely couldn't convince him otherwise. And so that was a little frustrating, and I had never really been drilled like that. No one had ever really come to me and asked me a question like that, and that I didn't really know an answer to. And so one of the things that he did is he gave me this framework that was very, very helpful to figure out what the answer was. And so he basically said, well, what I want you to do is I want you to basically picture yourself on your deathbed. And you can close your eyes too if you want. And look at your life backwards from the end of your life. And think about what things did I do? What didn't I do? Did I have any regrets, that things I wish I would have done? Did I want to have a family? Did I want to get married? What did my life look like? Did I care about my legacy post my life? And could I then think backwards and reverse engineer my life to now to minimize regret and make sure that when I was on my deathbed and I'm passing away, that I was satisfied with the whole of my life? So that was a very useful framework for me to think about what things do I actually care about? What do I actually want to do with my life? Am I actually spending time on the things that matter to me? And help me get back to the present moment then of what actually am I doing with my life? What is the purpose that I want to go after? And so eventually I was able to figure that out, and I think I mentioned that my purpose in life is just to help secure humanity's best probable future. So it became a question then, okay, figuring that out, what problems could we solve, which led me to energy and ESA, etc. But the other thing that we talked about a lot with finding your purpose and using that kind of exercise to get there was the importance of why you should find purpose. And the interesting thing that was shared with me, and I've heard this from other people too, is that, motivation and passion are both amazingly great things. But sometimes life throws at us challenges and curveballs. And not always are they enough to carry us through those moments. And that if you can find purpose, purpose is so superior to passion and motivation. Because passion and motivation comes and goes. We're passionate about the things that we enjoy and we're interested in and we're curious about. And we'll work on those, and then we may hit a challenge. And we may be motivated. We may wake up one day and have a bunch of energy and go, I want to go tackle this challenge and get through it. And then the next day you're tired. And that challenge comes again. And you don't have the same wherewithal to get through it. And life throws us these all the time, all over the place. But if you have purpose, purpose is going to allow you to have something much more powerful than motivation and passion. And when times get really tough, when you're at your wit's end and you feel like, man, maybe I can't do this, and you think about quitting, what's actually going to prevent you from quitting? Because if you give up on your life's purpose, you're giving up on everything you stand for. You give up on yourself. And if you can find it, it's such amazing fuel when you're not motivated, when you're not passionate about something, and a challenge comes up. You have that fuel to get you to the next thing. And I've found that to be true. I mean, there's been many times in the history of ESA, you think a decade of challenges that we've run into, some very complicated, others more fun. But the thing that's gotten us through is the purpose, the intention behind the actual mission. So when things are tough and challenging and they're not fun, I'm not motivated to solve for this problem, I'm not even curious about some of the challenges, the purpose keeps you going. And so that is one of the reasons that we've been able to go a decade and overcome a lot of those challenges, is because we found that early. And the other thing I want to mention too is, because it's important, is that everyone's purpose is different. So we have a lot of different people at ESA that all have different purposes than me. And we found ESA to be a vehicle for each one to individually fulfill their purpose. So what it is to you is going to be different than your neighbor or your other friend that's working on something similar. And so it's really up to us to figure out, what does that really mean for ourselves? And I go back to that exercise as being maybe the first step and easy starting point that people can use to start to do that discovery. And the last thing I'll say is that it's perfectly okay not to know what your purpose is. It takes time to figure it out. It may take you years to figure it out. It may take you months, and it's okay to not know. It's rare to figure that out. But I can tell you, it is one of the most powerful things you can put effort into finding. Because if you can achieve it, it will carry you through life, and you will be much more fulfilled with the things you get to work on. Because what is truly success? Success isn't simply just making money or being successful as the world puts it out there. What true success is progress on purpose. So every step you take towards the fulfillment of your purpose, that's really success. Fulfillment. Everything else is secondary. So if you're fulfilled, everything else is easier. So I just wanted to mention that too, because I didn't know what my purpose was when I started this, and eventually found it, but it was a process. It wasn't just like an easy thing just popped out of thin air. It took some work, and that process may take time, and it's perfectly okay not to know. The important thing is to go ahead and start.
Yeah, because it's hard to describe, but there's the reward at the end. Like, it's hard to describe what fulfillment is, but it's something that you never even expected that you could feel before you felt it. You know what I mean? It's
Absolutely.
something so personal, so universal too, and just so like, can this possibly be true? Like, something this like uniquely for me, or could this life? I mean, because your life it's like a fairy tale, really. You know what I mean? Well, and that was my next question is like, and you kind of already touched it. What's been the biggest struggle for you in living your purpose?
That's a great question. I'll say building ESA has been one big challenge. Now, there's a cosmic web of fun challenges and difficult ones. So I'll maybe give you some examples. I think one of the biggest challenges for us is that what we're working on and what we're doing is on the frontier of what we understand and know to be true in science, in physics, etc. And so a lot of the things we do, we're discovering new things that we don't have an answer for. We don't know why they happen. And so one of our core values at ESA is to embrace the unknown. And so we're constantly doing that. We're venturing into unknown territory where we can't go ask for advice from someone on the topic, or we see a new anomaly in the lab and we're looking at that and saying, okay, the textbook says that should not happen. That's not supposed to work that way. And so we have to back into trying to support, okay, why does that happen? The good thing for us is we do a lot of applied research. It's very little theory as it is applied. So we're looking at those kind of anomalies and saying, okay, what caused that? If we change how we're maybe powering a circuit or something of the nature, how does that affect the outcome? So we have 10 years of data that we've collected where we could change a variable here and we know what the outcome is going to be every time. We have a good idea of why that happens and a model of physics around it. But if you were to ask me with certainty on every single detail of the physics, is that exactly how it works? It may be not correct. And so there's things that, we have something that works. We know that it can work every time based on how we change things. But sometimes we see really anomalous things. Now, the tough part about that is not that they're anomalous. It's not dealing with the anomalies. We're actually pretty good at doing that. We're pretty unconventional problem solvers, and we're really good at figuring technical things out. What the challenge is that when we look at the world around us, there's a lot of people that aren't aware of some of the things that we're working on. So you look at, say, mainstream physics, mainstream science, the mainstream consciousness around the topic of quantum energy. A lot of people will look at what we're doing, they say, that's impossible, can't be done, breaks XYZ law of physics, must be a scam, they gotta be a fraud, etc. And so one of the big challenges is education. It's how do we take something that we know to be true and correct and inject that into the world and sept it into the minds of the mainstream, that they can actually get a handle on it, that they can realize that these are the breakthroughs of today, this is the frontier, and we're evolving our understanding of the universe. We're understanding more and more every day, but to allow the mainstream to begin to interface, accept, and understand that this is reality. These things exist. And so that's a challenge in itself. There's a general resistance in a lot of people's mindset. And some of that's just, general programming, and I don't knock anyone, like, someone that's an engineer that goes to school or a PhD quantum physicist may have a certain set of things they've learned in school that they were taught are correct. And some of the things we do are arguments to the things they've learned. And some of the things they've learned are not correct. So much of science is theory. And unfortunately in school we teach a lot of theory. And just because it's a theory does not mean it's correct. We're always learning new things. We're always evolving in science. We're always making new breakthroughs. And so to tell someone that has this history of learning and education around a topic that, well, you may be wrong. And it's not your fault. It's because we just didn't know everything of what you were taught. Sometimes there could be a resistance, an unlearning process to get to the place of learning something new. And so that happens a lot in the scientific community, but even in the mainstream of understanding, well, there are better solutions out there than oil and gas and solar and nuclear. And while we do have a good shot at building a sustainable future, there is hope. We could actually pull it off if we got together and we start to educate ourselves and we shed away our limiting beliefs and we start to look at things and observe them and reason with them and study them. That there might actually be breakthroughs here that can change the course of where we're going. So that's a big challenge for us. As I said, it goes all the way back to education. How do we help the world understand these things, start to pioneer the physics and the science and get consensus around it. And that's easier said than done. It's something we're learning every day how to do better and better. But as part of our job is to help the world come to terms with what this is and understand it best they can. And that's an important piece to allowing everyone to adopt it and start to benefit from it.
Yes, and Hunter, you and I share that like passion too, because I can't wait to do these short clips about Marco Rodin's understanding of the universe. And like you said, it's just like, this is so outside of what I was even taught. They're barely teaching the plasma exists, even now. And so understanding these ideas is I wouldn't say confrontational, but it is courageous. And I've been in conversations with you and people that are not even like, you can bend a spoon in front of someone or plug in one of your devices and they still can't even, it's just because it is a lot of change at once, But it really is exciting what you're doing, and I can only imagine that you would be a little bit weary, as you say, of just like having to apply all the courage, because when you apply all the courageousness in the lab and then in everywhere else, you want at least some people to be like, okay, good, I get it, man. Like, it's hard to trailblaze, like so. What effect do you think you've had on the people in the world around you by you living your purpose? Like you not sticking it out, but you applying your courage?
So, a really good question. I think we're at the beginning of seeing the kind of secondary effects that a company like ours can have. And, we've had some long philosophical conversations about the secondary effects that can take place about putting something like this into the world. We're deploying a technology, it's a real product that somebody will be able to buy and benefit from. But what that stands for is a little bit different in the sense of we're showing the world that things that once were thought to be impossible can be done. And you never know who might look at that and say, well, there's this thing that I want to work on. There's this thing that I'm passionate about that I don't know if I can do it. And they can look at people like us and say, well, if they could figure it out, they seem like they're pretty normal people. Maybe I got a shot at doing that too. And so I think there's an opportunity for us to continue to show the world that you can do really hard things that other people may not think is possible. If you have enough purpose and belief in yourself to keep going and keep working on these things, you can do it. I mean, a lot of the people that work at ESA are very normal people. They didn't come from wildly successful backgrounds or other. We're very normal human beings that came from very little and have made something out of this. And so I think that is a really interesting thing that we've started to see that with other people. I've had people come to us and say, hey, I was working on this thing and I was about to give up. And then I heard about what you guys have gone through. And I was like, wow, if they went through that and were able to accomplish this, I got a shot at doing what I want to do. So I think that's a beautiful thing. And I definitely want to continue to help inspire people through our actions and our efforts and what we're trying to accomplish with ESA. But there's plenty of examples out there of trailblazers around the world, that we even take inspiration of. People that decided they were going to follow their purpose and their passion and beliefs, and they were eventually, with some time and some effort and some gumption, able to do things that other people said they wouldn't be able to do. And so I think that's a beautiful thing when you can actually just go after things and make them happen. So I think we're just at the very beginning of that, but I'm already starting to see how we can help people move forward in the world outside of just the balance of, say, energy and cool technology and all that kind of thing.
That is so true, Hunter. This is the most iconic Renaissance story of our time. One of the most, maybe aside from a med bed or something like that. It's just like I can't believe this is true. Always on. You know what I mean? Not intermittent, it's really great. So the final question is, what if 68% of the world were living their purpose? as a majority of the people in the world, what would happen if a majority of the world were living their purpose?
Well, I think going back to what you just said, we would have a renaissance. I mean, we would be in such a different world, because the thing that I find a lot of times is so many of the problems that we have in society stem from not knowing what your purpose is. You know, there's plenty of people I've met that are wildly successful, that have tons of money, they have total freedom, they're in a different bracket of wealth, that are just very depressed, very unhappy, you know, turning to things like drugs and alcohol. And you would think, well, how is it that someone so successful can have such a messed up life? And a lot of that comes back to, well, it's fulfillment. Are you actually happy? What is happiness really? Like, you know, and some people will be happy in the moment, but fulfillment is a different kind of feeling. It transcends even happiness itself. And being fulfilled and being able to wake up every day and work on the thing that you feel the most fulfilled when you make progress on, that is like inspiring, it's invigorating, and it can prevent you from getting distracted by maybe the chaos of the world, and not like having to try to find happiness that's fleeting in other things that may be more challenging paths or other things. And I find that people that do know what they want to do in life and are fulfilled are some of the most amazing people. They're some of the most resilient people. They're some of the happiest people. And it's not about just the success the world sells everybody. It's so much more at a personal level that they're gaining from their experience in this life. And so I think if everyone, you know, even just a big percentage knew what their purpose is, we'd have a lot less existential problems. The world would be so happy, and hopefully it would be just, you know, a beautiful renaissance of transformation. So I think that hopefully the world can head in that direction.
Thanks to you and your leading the example. I really am excited about having Sedona be one of the homes of the Renaissance, and I really am excited for people to step out into their curiosity and see what's in there that's theirs to do and that really excites them, because I think you're hitting on, you know, you were a little bit offended because you were successful when you had that success coach. Like, I could feel when you were talking about that, you were kind of like, well, I'm already successful, so why are you trying to like go back to the square one and ask me such a basic question? Because can't you see that I've already done all this? Like, obviously my purpose is to create this, and I created it, and look at me, you know, I've been successful. So, but then it seemed like a deeper question, like at the end of this, where do you want to get there, and are you spending the time and energy? It's like my sister said, you know, are you like putting the ladder in the right place? Are you spending the time and energy doing the things that are going to add up to that end result, you know? So, and I'm really excited because it is really contagious, you know, when people step into their courage like you have, and they step into the grit, which you have, you know. It's like, and now you're starting to be in the ease and grace, and I'm so happy to witness you and Isa in this actual moment of all your hard work really lifting you guys up and lifting up and you feeling the fulfillment of your purpose. So Hunter, I leave you the final word. Congratulations on the 10 years and the next 10 years and the next 10 years and seeing all that come, you know, and the effect that you living your purpose has had on the world. I can't wait to have this conversation with you 20 years from now. So anyway, is there anything else you want to share with the world? And also, please let people know how to find you and on Instagram, website, etc., to see this video you just released, etc.
Well, thank you again so much for having me, Zenka. It's been an honor. And I think the last thing I'd leave people with is just everyone has a unique purpose. Everyone has a different purpose from the next person. And you may not know what it is today, or maybe you do, and it's perfectly okay not to know. And I know that you can figure it out. It's just going to take some time and some effort, but if you can get there, or I should say when you get there, it will carry you through life. It'll carry you through the most challenging times of life. It'll allow you to do so much more than you even know you're capable of today, and to truly find fulfillment and happiness. So I really appreciate the time again, Zenka. If anyone wants to learn more about ISA, you can go to isaenergy.com, isaenergy.com. Got some cool videos there, some educational material, and you can sign up for our newsletter and follow along as we make progress. And wishing you all the best of success on your journey.
Thanks everybody for joining us today. We'll see you next Monday on Awaken Your Purpose, the Holo Movement Purpose Lab podcast. Thank you for joining us today. It is our goal to give you the courage to begin to identify your passion and live your purpose for the sake of yourself and for the sake of us all. Over the course of this multi-year collaboration and research project, we have identified patterns and a 7-stage process that many people go through on their way to living their purpose. If you'd like to browse our archive or figure out what stage you're in, head over to holomovement.net/purpose. If you would like to browse our living library of resources, or if you found your purpose and want to contribute what worked for you, head over to lightnet.org/purpose. And as Mark Twain used to say, the most important day of your life is the day you're born and the day you figure out why. You're not alone. We will look forward to helping you on this incredible journey. This has been a collaboration between Holo Movement, LightNet, and incredible people like yourself. Special thanks to Good of the Whole. We'll see you next time.